Okay, algebra students, this is the tutorial video, as promised, for Builder 18. Now, to do this video, or to do the tutorial that we're going to cover here, you will need a copy of Builder 18, or you can just pause the video when we get to the particular problem. And if you do not have a TI-84 graphing calculator, you can use a website like Wolfram Alpha or Desmos, which are two freely available resources for you to check or do whatever we need to do on the calculator. You can do it with those websites. Still, this tutorial is more for those of you who will be using the TI-84 calculator. So I'm going to use an emulator today, and when you're back in class, then you'll be able to apply what you've learned in this video to the problems that you see in class. I will also show the solution by hand. So each problem will have two solutions, calculator if possible, and then by hand. Okay, so without any further prefatory comments, let's get to number one. All right, and number one gives us this. Says, so this is number one. Number one says, which function is equivalent to f of x equals 6x squared minus 13x plus 5. Okay, so what we're being asked to do here is factor this. Okay, we're being asked to factor. Now, here's something we need to be aware of. This particular problem has something called a leading coefficient. Okay, a leading coefficient, that's this 6 right here. And because it has that leading coefficient, the normal way of factoring won't work. So here's how you factor this. Now, if you're one of those people who just wants to see the calculator solution, jump to the end of the video, or to the end of this problem on the video so you can see the calculator solution. But I'm going to work this out by hand first. So you cannot just use the factoring method that we have learned in class to do this because of that leading coefficient. So here's what you do. The first thing you do is you multiply 6 times 5. So the first term by the last term. We'll create like side work over here. Okay, this will be side work. Let me designate this area. This is useful sometimes. So you got your problem over here, and then this is side work. All right, here's our first piece of side work. We need to multiply 6 times 5. All right, and 6 times 5 is 30. Fair enough? What does that give us? Well, we need to think of two numbers that add to equal negative 13, and that we're getting that from right here, this term right here, and those two terms need to multiply to equal 30, positive 30. So you think of terms that might satisfy these two conditions. They add together to equal negative 13, and they multiply together to equal 30. Okay, and just in case you are unsure, if you can't come up with it and you're thinking, well, what do I do if I'm just unable to think of it? Well, you can factor 30. You take 30, and what we're going to do is list all of the factors of 30. So we're going to start with 1 and 30. Okay, now those multiply to 30, but what do they add to? They add up to 31. All right? How about -1 and -30? So those multiply to positive 30, but they add to -31. We want it to be -13. Let's keep going. What else? How about 10 and 3? Those add to 13 and multiply. So they multiply to 30 and they add to positive 13. Okay, how about -10 and -3? Okay, -10 times -3 equals 30, and they add to -13. So those are our numbers that we need, -10 and -3. Because look, -10 plus -3 equals -13. And -10 times -3 equals positive 30. So that's how we know our answers are correct. Now here's what we're going to do. We are going to replace -13x with -10x minus 3x. Okay, and the reason I'm going to do that is because these two things equal -13. Okay, -13x. Okay, so now what do? Well, we are going to rewrite our equation with the replaced terms. Rewrite 6x squared minus 10x minus 3x plus 5. Okay, and this is still the same thing because -10x minus 3x is -13x. So we haven't changed anything. Okay, so now what? Okay, now we're going to do something called factor by grouping. Okay, we'll write that out. Now we're going to factor by grouping. See if I can adjust the contrast on this a little bit. All right, okay, factor by grouping. What that means is you're going to place parentheses around the first two terms and around the last two terms, just like that. And we're going to rewrite this using this notation with these parentheses. 6x squared minus 10x times -3x plus 5. All right, and here's what we want to do. We want to ask ourselves, what can we take out of this term right here? What can I factor out of just this term? You know, the question requires you to say, well, what is the same in both the 6x squared and the negative 10x inside this binomial? Binomial means two terms. Here, there's a term here, 6x squared, and here's a term right here, negative 10x. So I have to say, what is the same in both? Well, let's look at the coefficients. Here's a coefficient, here's a coefficient, 6 and 10. What do they share in common? Well, 6 can be broken down into 3 times 2, and 10 can be broken down into 2 and 5. So they share a 2 in common. So I can factor out a 2. Let's show you how that works. So here I'm going to factor out a 2. And whenever I factor something out like that, I have to write it over here. That keeps the whole thing in balance. Okay? You always have to do it this way. Now, let's rewrite. What have I accomplished here? Well, I've got 2. I'm going to leave myself a little bit of room. Open parentheses. Now I've got to do this. 6 divided by 2 is 3x squared minus 10 divided by 2 is 5x. Okay, 5x. Close parentheses. Leave a little space. Open parentheses. Negative 3x plus 5. Now what? Well, go back to your first binomial term. This is binomial right here. There's nothing common between 3 and 5. Those are both prime numbers. So now I'm going to be focused in on these x's right here. Here I've got x squared, and here I've got x. Well, x is just x times x. See, got x times x, and I've got x. So what do they share in common? I can take one x from each. Now remember, so let's do that and then I'll show you what's going to happen. I'm going to divide x squared by x and x by x, and then put an x out here. This keeps it all in balance. Alrighty, so now let's rewrite. I've got 2x, open parentheses, 3. Now I've got to do this division, x squared divided by x. Now remember, x squared divided by x equals x raised to the 2 minus 1, or just x raised to the first power, which is just x. So 3x squared divided by x is just 3x. Minus 5, and now I have x divided by x. Well, if you're not sure what that is, you could say x divided by x equals x 1 minus 1. Okay, and x to the 1 minus 1 is x to the 0th power, and the 0 exponent rule says that anything raised to the 0th power is 1. So x divided by x is 1. So I could write a 1 there, or I could just leave it, because, you know, negative 5 times 1, it's kind of unnecessary to write it. So I'll just close the parentheses here. And now it's time to deal with this binomial. So I've dealt with this guy over here. He's done for now. Now I'm going to deal with this guy over here. What can I pull out that is common to both of these? Well, you might say nothing, all right? You might say nothing. But take a look at this. Right here I have 3x minus 5. And I want this term to be just like this term. I want these two terms to be the same. See this binomial 3x minus 5? Here I've got negative 3x plus 5. I want it to look just like this term. What do? Well, what I do is I will factor out a negative 1. That will get rid of the negative in front of the 3, and it will change the plus 5 to a minus 5. So let's do that. Okay, you're going to draw your division line under the number, all right? Just the numbers. So divide by negative 1 and divide by negative 1. And to keep this expression in balance, I'm going to multiply the whole thing by negative 1. Okay, and now let's rewrite. Down on this line now. So I have 2x, open parentheses, 3x minus 5. Now over here I have minus 1, open parentheses. Now I've got negative 3 divided by negative 1, and that equals positive 3. X, nothing happened to the x. Now I've got 5 divided by negative 1. So that's negative 5 minus 5, close parentheses. So this is good news because the 3x minus 5's match now. Okay, that's good. That's what we wanted. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to group together these terms that we found. The 2x and the minus 1 are going to come together to form a new binomial. Right? And that binomial is 2x minus 1. Now that's going to be a factor. And then my other factor is 3x minus 5. So I only use one of these, just one of these. Now if you're unsure, if you feel like, did he do that correctly? Let's use the FOIL method to check. Remember FOIL? FOIL means first, outer, inner, last. Okay? So let's do FOIL and find out if I did this correctly. So here's the first term, and that would be 2x times 3x. 2x times 3x is 6x squared. Outer, 2x times negative 5. Two x times negative 5 is negative 10x. Inner, negative 1 times 3x. That is negative 3x. And then finally, last, negative 1 times negative 5. Okay, that is plus 5. Now, we have two common terms in here. We have two x terms. See, here I've got an x term, and here I've got an x term. So I can actually combine these. These are like terms. So I'm going to combine like terms right here. So this negative 10x minus 3x, negative 10x minus 3x, that equals negative 13x. And if you do this in your calculator, you just say negative 10 minus 3, It's negative 13, and then the x just comes along for the ride. So I can rewrite this finally as 6x squared minus 13x plus 5. And this is the check. So this is the check. This should match the original function. So let's check. Does it match? 6x squared minus 13x plus 5. 6x squared minus 13x plus 5. Very good. Okay, maybe we'll give it a third check right there. Fantastic. So that means, say, well, wait a minute. What was my answer again? Yeah, here's your answer right here. Your answer, you were looking for these factors. These factors right here. So those are your factors. These are your factors. Okay? So this is cool, and let me see if I can zoom out to show this whole thing. Zoom out a little bit. So the whole thing is in frame. Okay, I guess it's about as good as it's going to get. So there, if you want to take a screenshot of that or freeze the image, that's the whole problem worked out. There, as close as I can get it. And this is how you would solve it by hand. Now, yeah, I've been talking for 22 minutes, but I'm going over this very slowly. So now I will show you how you can use answer choices given to you on the STAR test or on a multiple choice exam and use your calculator to arrive at this, or at least check your work and arrive at this really, really quickly, okay? So let me zoom back in on my work surface. Okay. And let me pull up the calculator. So here's a emulator of the TI 84 Plus C Silver Edition. This is what you're using in class. And what you're going to do is go to y equals and type in your given function in y1. That would be 6x squared. Okay, if you're looking, this is the keys I'm hitting down here. 6x squared, right arrow, minus 13x plus 5. Okay, if you want to, you can graph that and see what it looks like. You don't have to. That's what it looks like. Right? And now you're going to test answer choices. So from Builder 18, your first answer choice was 3x, oops, doing something wrong. So this is something I told you not to do. So you got to put it into parentheses. Open parentheses, 3x minus 1, close parentheses, open parentheses, 2x minus 1, close parentheses. And you can look at this two ways. You could graph it. As you can see, they don't overlap perfectly, so you know that this is not correct. Or if you didn't like the visual, you could go to second graph. What you're looking for are y values that are identical. And here you got 5 and 1, negative 2 and 2, 3 and 15. This is not the same. This is wrong. So we'll go back to y equals, and we'll clear out what's in y2 and try the next one. So the next one is 3x. Oops, I'm doing it again. Okay, you guys don't make my mistakes. Learn from me. Open parentheses. 3x minus 5, close parentheses, open parentheses, 2x minus 1, close parentheses. Okay, now graph this. There it is. Did you see how the blue graph went first and then the red graph just went right over it? And you look at second graph, you see they all line up. 5, 5, negative 2, 2, 3, 3, 20, 20, 49, 49. So these are correct. Now, someone asked in class today, it was a good question. They said, now, when you solved it by hand, you had the 2x minus 1 first and then the 3x minus 5. Is that okay? Yes, that is okay. It doesn't matter which order you put your binomial factors in. Okay? Let's go back to our work surface now. Okay, so there again, just confirmation that everything we did was correct. Okay, and that's how you do number 1. All right, so we're going to split these up into individual videos. You guys check the playlist or the recommended videos, or just go to newest videos to find subsequent problems. Thanks.